September 2020, continuing with our classes for PhD in education. And because of COVID, we had to abruptly switch over to online education. Now, as an older student and somebody that has their master's in e-learning and education, it did not faze me, and I rather enjoyed sitting at home for the 5 hours of class versus in the classroom. I will thank my professor because they did a very good job of making extra rooms and engaging in a virtual session that forced us to not only use technology to be better, one, for ourselves, two, because as future educators, and in this case, pursuing to be a professor, you need to be able to use this technology, even if it's not something you would usually do. Breaking off into individual groups not only helps with our cohort and building that relationship that we've been reading about in article after article to build success, but it also allows you to navigate technology that sometimes seems intimidating, but is going to continue to be normal use for everybody. And what we have to remember is, although we're a little older, our students will be younger, and they won't have the trepidation in using technologies because it'll be natural for them. Now, continuing on, most of our individual articles that we also worked as groups were doctoral education success. Great things, practices that we broke up into groups of 4 or so. So we had 6 different groups, or 5 or 6 different groups to explain what this article, each individual one, had, the pros, the cons, what we could use from it. And then not only did we get our group and explain, we broke up into other groups after on and talked about what each individual took from the presentations and how they could apply it to their real world. And what I mean by real world is, in this, the doctoral education, talking about, hey, knowing your weaknesses, your strengths, what things ground you, how you can prepare. I will give a great kudos to UCCS because in most of the readings, they have followed the majority of the assessments and evaluations from research to make their program succeed. For instance, this class that we're working on now, taking that, breaking up into groups, hearing the strengths, weaknesses, not only doing just straight classwork, allows us to understand and get more involved right away. Because as we can tell, with such a large and various professional experiences as well as educational experiences, it allows us to understand who is going to be better suited to help you when you need time for specific tasks. For instance, one of the people in my group was an Elizabeth. She's a lecturer, i.e. a professor of math at the university. So any statistical analysis she can read and understand in those terms, and it makes it easier to ascertain the calculations, the values in that sense. Where some of our other ones have the more social emotional learning aspects, and even though you have that number, they equate it to more of a qualitative than a quantitative study. Those relationships are important because as you're going through research, which we spent the first, we had a little lecture, then we spent about an hour going through our proposed research topics. And what I mean by that is our end of year portfolio topics that we will also be writing a literature review in this class. The literature review for this class will get us started on, in theory, if you pick the topic and you can stick generally in that subject for the end state of the year's project. I do realize that some of them have not put enough time initially into it to pick a subject that they've thought about in detail and started truly problem solving and writing their research questions so that you can pick a subject or be very close to that end research question. Almost all of the classes are geared towards you're doing work in the class, but it accumulates to an end goal. And so if you use it in the class, it makes it less work at the end. You can always change your project. But remember, this 8 weeks that we're working on could get you started in 10, 12 pages of literature review that hopefully at least half of it, if not more, is directly related to the subject that you do. You pick it. So, most important take is you're starting a program, understand what you want, and know that it's going to refine. But if you really narrow it as much as you can before you get in there, almost all your work, or as much as you possibly can, will be used directly in class, graded, and refined to make your final product a paper, project, research that you can use. Overall, it was a great class, and I enjoyed our fellowship, our understanding of our cohort, learning some of the strategies, some of the hiccups, and then more importantly, at a point where I understand what I want to research, I'm going to continue to read and write towards that. And then the last final bit will be determined on what the gaps are in the research. Other than that, Jeff Dykeman on my long road to this educational PhD.